Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Whitwam Organics sort of weekly garden and nursery report. I'm Dave Whitwam, your host. I'm saying that because I've been out for the past 2 weeks. So today we're going to make a fire, and I'm also going to, this is a gardening lesson, I promise, but I thought we'd have a little bit of fun with it. To really drive home some of the concepts that I'm going to be utilizing the fire for as a metaphor. But before we talk about building a fire and actually build a fire, let's get into the nursery report. I'm sorry I was a little late getting started today. Having some camera issues. Trying to do some fancy work here with the camera, and you'll see once we get going. So let's look at the nursery report first. Let me just tell you guys what we got going on out in the nursery, and then I'll kind of jump into some of the projects I've been working on, what we're doing in the gardens and what we're planting, so on and so forth. So let's see here. I mean, it's right behind me. I could probably just get up and go walk over there and shout at you guys, but just look. I hope everybody's having a good year so far. Search available. Helps if I know how to spell. Available seedlings. So if you've never been on our website and you go under the shop tab, you can go straight to a section called available seedlings. We try and keep it updated. We update inventory once a week. And pretty much everything we're growing out in the garden is going to be in that available seedlings collection on our website. If we're out of something and it is in that collection, then we're probably just temporarily out, but we are still growing it. So that's why we haven't pulled it from that collection yet. So up and coming, we have Astro Arugula, Rocket Arugula, African Tree Basil, African Blue Basil. That's a popular one. I'll tell you what, we've been selling that stuff all over the country. Lemon Basil, Red Stem, Thai Basil, Rapini. We were doing the early fall. We're now moving into the early spring Rapini. Paracicaba, broccoli from Brazil, definitely one of my favorites. It's one of the first broccolis we plant in the late summer for fall, and one of the last ones we plant in the spring. And I even will grow it for the greens over the whole summer. The thing's a beast. But Calabrese sprouting broccoli, purple sprouting broccoli, Brussels sprouts, Chinese cabbage, red cabbage. We have another interesting plant. It's called, it's a sprouting or flowering cabbage. It's called shuka. It grows like almost like a viney broccoli rabe, but you're harvesting like little stems and florets off of it and eating the leaves. It's actually really good. Calendula, green cabbage, snowball cauliflower, bunch of different kinds of chard, Swiss chard, lipstick chard, ruby red chard, Ford hook chard, which is giant and amazing. Cilantro, we just ran out. We are going to be planting a little bit more. Collards, we have a new variegated Florida heirloom collard. That's new on the website. Check it out. It actually will get variegated leaves when the cold hits it. Georgia collards, dill ducket, young green, Yu Choi Sum. Those are both flowering brassicas, which is kind of a cut and come again plant. It grows stems and florets, and you're harvesting and eating the leaf, stems, and flowers off of it. Kale, we have blue curl kale, lacinato kale, red Russian kale, Siberian kale, and then one of my absolute favorites, Chinese flowering kale, also known as Chinese broccoli. I can't even say enough about this food crop. Actually, if you give me just 1 second, I harvested some that I think I have in the car, and I can actually show you guys what the harvest looks like. I'll be right back. You guys still with me? All right, so this is it right here. I'm dropping it. Come on, focus. There you go. So this is actually more related to kale than it is to a broccoli. And it really holds up when you cook it. This is what it looks like when the flowers start to open. And you eat the whole stem and the leaves. There's a restaurant here in Tampa called Yummy House. The open location is on Hillsborough by the drive-in movie theater. They have this on the menu as Chinese broccoli, I believe. Chinese kale, Chinese broccoli, a lot of different names. Stir-fry broccoli. It could be called broccolini, but most of the time broccolini is broccoli rabe, which grows just like this. I mean, it's stems with smaller florets, but that's more related to a mustard, so it's way more sharp and spicy. This tastes like a little more of like a complex broccoli. But where this stuff is really a rock star is when you cook it. So you can like cook this stuff, like broccoli that most of us are used to eating. If you like cook it too much, it turns brown and mushy and gets really gross. So this really holds up to cooking. So it's really good for soups and stir fries. God, that's so good. It's even better cooked. I think the dish I got from the Yummy House was like tossed in sesame oil, cooked in sesame oil with these huge chunks of garlic. It was so good. Oh my gosh. So that is our Chinese kale or Chinese broccoli. Let's keep going here. I want to start fire. Where were we? Kohlrabi. We got green kohlrabi, purple kohlrabi. We're out of Lantana. That's going to take a little while. Bib lettuce, black seed Simpson, butter crunch, cimarron, romaine, freckles romaine, green oak leaf, Jericho romaine, Manoa. The Jericho romaine and the Manoa mini butter crunch from Hawaii, we actually grow that year round here in Tampa. Very, very heat tolerant. Won't get bitter. The Manoa will bolt a little bit if you let it try to like go to full head over the summer, but we'll be planting those probably June, July-ish. Is when we'll probably give it a break, but we start right back up again at like the end of August. Red fire lettuce, red romaine, ruby red leaf lettuce, Mizuna and Mabuna. If you've never had those, I really recommend trying them. There was a restaurant here in Tampa. It's Mizuna and Mabuna are in the mustard family, and it's really light green, a little heavier than a lettuce. You can do like a light saute with them, almost like chop it up and put it in your eggs after the eggs are done cooking, like a wilt. And you can use them as a lettuce, like in a salad, because they're that mild in flavor. We had a restaurant here that served local food, tried to do seasonal stuff, and they, so good. Mizuna, it was a Mizuna salad with, I believe, sunflowers, sunflower shoots, sunflower microgreens, and chunks of watermelon with a raspberry vinaigrette. And it was the bomb. It was so good. Definitely a good mix of flavors. Ooh. I bet some mint would be good in that too. I was just looking at our next thing on the list. So we have mojito mint, we have Vietnamese mint, mustards. We also just brought in Florida broadleaf mustard. I'm trying to bring in more vegetables that are actually, I mean, everything we have does well in Florida, but I'm hunting down, I've gone around the world and back. So I've hunted down around the world of different types of vegetables that do, and experimented with them and figured out what does well here in Central Florida. And I've kind of looped back around, and now I'm actually just looking for stuff that was developed for Central Florida. So we got the Florida broadleaf mustard. That's also new to our catalog. We also have a red giant broadleaf mustard, the Mike Giant mustard, nasturtiums. If you haven't tried nasturtiums, get yourself some nasturtiums. Beautiful flower. The whole plant's edible, nice and peppery. Chinese white stem pak choi, parsley, peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants are coming up. They're not quite ready yet. We might have some sweetie cherry tomatoes over there that we just potted up in 4-inch pots, and they'll be ready to go soon. Spinach, it's not too late for spinach. Seeds or plants. We got a little cold snap right now. If you want more spinach, plant the seeds now with the colder weather. I haven't updated the description on the catalog yet, but the yellow squash that we have now is also a powdery mildew resistant variety of yellow squash. We also have a powdery mildew resistant variety of zucchini. What does that mean? That means barring colder weather, you can get that stuff started back when the days are too short normally for these squashes, because they get wiped out by powdery mildew. So if you want to try and get some of that going, you're definitely, you're rolling the dice at this point. But you know what? Every single day or every single time that we get cold weather or frost, obviously one of those is going to be our last one. And I mean, for me, squash seeds come up so quickly and they're relatively inexpensive. It's nothing to, maybe pop some in now. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. Put more in. Not a big deal, if the stuff gets wiped out by a frost or a freeze. But if you're right, you'll be weeks and weeks ahead of everybody else who tries to play it safe. Tatsoi, oh gosh. Our choho, our tatsoi, I'm growing it in one of my school gardens, and they had to go home before they got to harvest, right before Christmas. They got to go home, or they had to go home because of COVID. There was a little outbreak at the school, and rather than, bringing the kids back, for a week, they just left for 2 weeks and then took another week, and then were gone for their 2 weeks for Christmas. And so they didn't get their harvest. So over Christmas break, it was right before Christmas. I got in touch with somebody at the school and had them get in touch with all the parents of my kids in the gardening class. I went to the garden, harvested everything for the kids, put it all in bags, and met them outside the school. And the parents came by and they got their harvest right before Christmas. And so one of the things that was in the bag was Swiss chard and tatsoi, or our choho tatsoi. I just thought that this was cool. That's why I'm telling you the story. So I didn't get to, hands-on work with the kids with these foods. Here's your bag of stuff. Some of the kids set it right in their fridge. Most of them ate it. But every one of them that ate it, I asked them what their favorite thing was, and they said spinach. So these kids don't know, right? And so my point is that when someone tells you that tatsoi is a good spinach replacement, the kids don't lie. They didn't know what was in the bag. They don't even know what spinach looks like off the plant. They all thought it was spinach because it's a really good spinach substitute. And these Choho greens, they're so heat tolerant. They'll go probably until late May. They'll definitely, way outpace any real spinach. So I really recommend getting that stuff in your garden. Real nice cut and come again plant. If you want to produce a lot of food in a small space, tatsoi is definitely one to get. Tarragon, as I said before, we're just starting to, our tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants are all up, nice and tiny. We're going to be putting them in 4-packs here soon. Probably about another 2 or 3 weeks. We'll be putting in cucumbers, beans in the nursery. Usually, I like to at least be able to see Valentine's Day on the 2-week forecast and kind of get a gauge of what the weather's doing. I mean, it's crapshoot, still just guessing, but we'll make the best guess. So, where have I been for the past 2 weeks? I put in a garden. Well, I repaired a garden. I had a contract right around the corner from me at a center called J.L. Young. Shout out to any J.L. Young residents who are watching. Woo-hoo. I really appreciate you guys. But they had a garden that I put in there about 5 years ago, and they did the best they could with it over the past couple years. Had a couple residents that were still kind of poking away at it. But the wood had been there for a long time. I had actually moved the wood from another garden into that garden. So I think the wood there was 6 or 7 years old and falling apart. Irrigation needed repair, fresh soil. So I went in there and replaced their 4x16 beds. So that's one of the things I was working on, getting them up and going and getting them planted. And then while I was in the middle of that, had a rather famous person, Dexter Jackson, from previously of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, MVP for the Super Bowl here in Tampa, approached me about putting in a garden at his center, which is the Oaks, which is right around the corner from J.L. Young. The cool thing about this is I've worked with the Oaks. So at one point we had the kids from the Oaks Youth Center going over and working. Oh, I forgot to mention, J.L. Young is a Tampa Housing Authority senior living facility. And so we had a garden at J.L. Young, and half a mile away is the Oaks at Riverview, which is a center for the kids. And they would bring the kids over to work in the garden at the senior center at J.L. Young. It was a super cool program. It was great, but COVID. So I'm putting a garden in there too. I'm right in the middle of that. Got to have it done by February 1st. Something tied in with the Super Bowl, I'm assuming. Yeah, so that's what I've been busy working on. Plus, I'm updating some stuff with my website. I'll let you guys know when that releases. So on to what we want to talk about today. Who's piping in here? Oh, Corey. Do you eat the flowers? I was asked if I eat the flowers. Yes, I eat the flowers. Eat the whole thing. Seriously, guys, if you're in Tampa, Yummy House, it's on Uber Eats. Go on there and get their Chinese broccoli, Chinese kale. I believe they have 2 different styles. And you will be growing the heck out of this every year after you actually taste it. Wow. Anyway, so this was the thing that made me late. I've got a secondary camera here set up. Let's see how this works. All right. Boom! Look at that. All right. Let's see if I can do this without knocking it over. So we're gonna build a campfire. Okay. And maybe what does this do? No, I don't want that. Okay, so we're gonna build a campfire, and I'm gonna talk about what to do, what not to do, why it's important. Like, we're literally just gonna talk about fire. And then what I want y'all to do, those of you watching, is I want you to try and start guessing what the heck this has to do with gardening. And no, it's not because it's getting cold tonight. All right, so first things first. I'm gonna get down here. Let's see. Can you see me? Oh, cool. A little bit of a lag, but that's okay. All right, so, and you all can pipe in anytime and tell me what you think I'm doing right or wrong, why you think it's right or wrong, and then you'll probably start to figure out what the heck this has to do with gardening. So we've got a few different things here. Let's see. I've got out. Okay, so we've got some, just put it right here. We've got some giant oak logs. I mean, they're not really giant, but it's got some big oak. I'm pretty sure that this oak right here is, well, I've been burning it, so I know it's cured. This would have been a more complete example if I actually had if I actually had, I'm sorry, I'm reading people's comments. If I actually had some green wood, that would complete. I was thinking about like soaking down some of these big oak logs in water just to demonstrate and make a complete example. But anyway, so I got these bigger oak logs right here. And then I have some smaller, this is pine right here. Let me see, I got it over here. So this is some pine right here. And then I have some smaller oak right there. And then I have some even smaller oak. See? Some like oak sticks. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start a fire, right? Oh, I got it. What else I got here? I got some newspaper. I got some newspaper right here. Okay, so we got some newspaper. And then, oh, lordy, lordy. Don't tell me my matches are gone. Where'd they go? Hang on, guys. They're right inside. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. I gotta figure out how to get around this camera without knocking it over. I have to go around back. All right, guys, I'm back. Corey said he already guessed it, but he didn't want to ruin it. All right, so talk amongst yourselves. That's right. Quick, rub two sticks together. So I got my matches. I got two cameras here. I got my matches. Okay, so again, you guys can pipe up. I'll be like looking up at the comments here. That's not it, Tammy. But yes, they are good for the garden. Okay, but y'all can pipe up at any minute and tell me what I'm doing wrong. So I'm just going to take these giant oak logs and I'm just going to put them in here. And then I'm going to light them. All right, here we go. Watch this work. Totally mess up my example. Oh, it's burning. Come on, guys. What am I doing wrong here? Trying to light these big oak logs with a match. What's the problem? Ow. Darn it, it's not lighting. Well, that didn't work. That doesn't make sense. They're good fuel. Huh. So let me take those out. And we'll start again. Okay, this time I'm going to burn some paper. Okay, so we're going to put some paper in here and we're going to burn that. Okay, so there we go. I got the paper going now. Well, that's good. I got fire. Cool. All right, guys, we're done, right? All right, so we got some fire going here. So we're good, right? This has the makings of the longest episode yet. No, wait, where are we at on time? We're at 26:45, Scott. No, we've gone well over an hour before, so I think we're good. All right, so we got a fire, guys. That's it. We're done, right? That was easy to light. That got burning really easily, huh? Oh, wait. Wait a second. It's going out. Well, that got lit really easily, but it went out quick, didn't it? Mike, he never camped. Okay, so I'm going to try something a little different here. So, we've got this. I put the bigger logs in. Y'all think I could just put the big logs in and then put paper on them? I wonder if that'll work, right? And put the big logs in. Let's just put some big logs in. And then we'll put some paper in there, right? Get those stacked up. We'll put this one like this. I wonder how many people are still watching. 14 of you! Y'all are patient. All right, so we got the paper going in there, so I'm just going to add some more paper here. Now, this will work, right? Like, this will totally work. However, I'm going to be here all night shoving paper in here, right? I mean, if I literally just sat here and kept crumpling up paper, this would work. It worked really good, right? We get the paper going. Hopefully the paper lights the big oak logs. Now, again, I don't know if y'all remember me saying I wanted some green oak logs. These are cured oak logs to demonstrate something else. So I could literally keep this going by just cramming paper in here, right? I could just keep cramming paper in here. And then that paper will light. And then eventually those oak logs are going to light. And they're going to start burning. But, so everybody who's watching and is probably kind of already said it. We're going to take these out. Get back in there. And then take these out. Actually, I'm going to put one in. So what are we missing? What we're missing is, you guys, some of y'all said it. We're missing starter logs. We're missing tinder. We're missing kind of something that's in between, right? So remember I said I got this pine. We can put some of that in. I do want to put more paper in, though. Put some more paper in. And then I'm going to get these sticks. I'm going to put some sticks in there. I'm going to get a little more paper. Oh, we're down to 10. People are dropping like flies. I'm getting bored watching David make a fire. All right, so we're going to put some paper in. And then I got these other like medium logs here. We can kind of put those in there like that. And now I'm going to put these bigger logs on top of those. Make sure we got good airflow. Also want to make sure we got place for the actual heat to build up and for the actual air to be able to come in. So y'all think that's going to go now? Check out the sunset. I can't see it from here. Get some of this paper going. All right, Corey, are you still with me? All right. So guys, what does this have to do with your garden? What do each of these things represent in your garden? We have the paper, which got going pretty easy, but it also went away pretty quick. And we got these sticks in here, and they're going to get going a little bit easier than that. They're also not going to stick around as long as the big logs. And then we got the logs that are going to supply us a long period of fuel for our fire here. Corey. These big logs are going to provide us our food for long periods of time, but they're really hard to get going. I mean, I couldn't just light them. So Kenny and Corey are both barking up the right tree. So what these things represent is these big logs right here. This is like your compost or your soil. Okay. This is good fuel for the long run, but it's really hard to get going. So basically what we're looking at here is we're looking at a direct trade-off between availability, how quickly something is available, and how long it sticks around. So the more available this fuel is, faster it goes away, but the faster it gets going. So the smaller sticks, these right here, these would represent like your granular organic fertilizers. Okay. And then the paper would be using liquids, fish emulsion, compost tea, worm tea. We have a product that's my product, Compost Plus. That's your paper. And as you guys can see, even though I kind of have everything in and I have it all in the right place, once I actually get the fire going, I do want to maybe keep adding a little bit more paper so everything really, really gets going. So typically when I plant a garden, I add my compost, you know, top it up with soil, or fill the new bed with soil, add my granular fertilizers, plant my garden, and then use my liquids on the day of planting. But then I might go and follow up over the next couple weeks, once or twice a week, maybe up to 4 times a week, using these liquids to just kind of keep pushing everything along to really get this thing up and going. Now, what about greenwood? So greenwood, Corey asked, what about greenwood? So in this analogy, the greenwood or wet wood, that would be the equivalent of like mushroom compost or something that isn't quite finished. In other words, like even when everything is right, move the plastic bin away from the fire. Even when everything else is good and right, it still might not really get going. And usually if you have compost that isn't finished or isn't ready, or, you know, I'll take, this analogy is not perfect, but I'll take it. I'll keep going. Maybe the wrong kind of wood, maybe not the best kind of wood. Uncured manure or mushroom substrate, something that just isn't really ready to be soil for your garden. That would be like using green wood. And if you've ever tried to burn with green wood or the wrong kind of hardwood or not hardwood, you actually need a lot more paper and sticks to really keep that fire going. So one of the ways you can always remedy that, I mean, it stinks, is if your compost isn't right, is you probably are going to be using a lot more solid and liquid organic fertilizers to really keep pushing things along. I mean, so it's not complete now. And what I've found from talking to gardeners who are kind of failing, it's because they're messing up at one of these three things. So, once you get comfortable using granular organic fertilizers, and once you get comfortable using, well, I want to go with the greenwood here thing in a minute too, and these larger oak logs, and run with that analogy too here in just a second. So yeah, so foliar spray would be like flash paper. Your chemical, Corey was saying it earlier, your chemical fertilizers, that's like diesel fuel. So I mean, pretty much don't need anything else in there. It can burn all on its own. But when I'm talking to gardeners and they're messing something up, it's usually one of these three things. So they either, if their soil sucks, then they have to use a lot of a granular fertilizer, lot of liquid fertilizer. If they aren't using a granular fertilizer and their compost is good, but it's just a little too, big, so to speak, then they're using a lot of liquids to really keep their garden going and keep it looking good. Now, let's talk about the heat that's going on in here. Let's talk about the actual fire. Can anybody tell me what that is? Like the coals in the bottom of this, like what does that represent in this analogy? Anyone? No one? Okay, that's your biology. So basically, the more active your biology is in your garden bed, the more you can get away with just throwing and hunking organic matter at your soil and having it break down into something that the plants can use. So the longer you've been gardening in the same spot, much in the same sense that if you've been camping in the same spot for a few days, it's way easier to get a fire going in the morning for your breakfast than when you first showed up and everything is like cold and really nothing's been going on there. So even in active soil, when I'm just, adding new soil to an active garden bed, I will still use granular fertilizers and liquid fertilizers, because if you've ever been camping for a few days and you got that hot bed of coals out there in the morning for breakfast, you can totally listen up. You can totally throw logs on that bed of coals, and you will get a fire, right? But nobody's had coffee yet. Y'all got somewhere to be. You're going canoeing at 9. Nobody has time to wait to cook breakfast. I'm talking about cooking on the fire. Nobody has time to wait for those logs to finally smolder on the bed of coals and go, because that could take 10 minutes, 30 minutes. It'll happen if you have a hot bed of coals. It'll happen. So even when I have an active garden and I'm adding fresh compost as my main fuel, I will still kick in some organic fertilizer and put the stuff on a small regimen just to kick everything in the butt. Because on the camping analogy, you're talking about 10 minutes, 20 minutes. That's a lot of time when you have to be somewhere at 9 and you haven't had coffee yet. In the garden, just putting compost in, even in an active soil, and waiting for that to become available to your plants, that could be 2 weeks. That could be 3 weeks. And when we're talking about annual vegetables in Florida, where the seasons switch on a dime like that, ain't nobody got time for that. Okay? 2 to 3 weeks is a long time. That's literally going to be 2 to 3 weeks of harvest that you lost, because whatever's coming at the end of that season that's going to kill your plants, whether it's our first freeze in the fall or winter, or it's the heat of the summer, or it's the daily rains, or it's the first hurricane, whatever that event is that's going to shut those plants down that you're growing, it's a coming every cycle, every year. So losing 2 to 3 weeks on the front end is literally losing 2 to 3 weeks on the back end. So to me, I'm all about just adding compost to my garden that have been there and they've been active for a while. But I still think to really get that fire going, you're going to need to add some paper and some sticks. So definitely on a new planting. So like even when we sell good compost in a brand new bed, the biology in the soil is really that's sitting in a pile of soil. There's probably most of the biology that's in there that your plants need, just not in the ratios that you need them. It's probably leaning a little more toward like just soil that's been sitting there, maybe a little even more toward compost and composting. Then that's really what happens when you cure it. It goes more toward just soil, but it's still not the same biology ratios as soil you've been growing in. So the biology that's in the soil that lives in a relationship with your plants, those populations really don't peak up until they start getting sugars that the plants make through photosynthesis. So it's almost like, no plants, no biology, no plants. So sometimes in a new planting, you could put your stuff in there, and if you don't add some granular fertilizer for those plants to get at as soon as possible, and then follow up with like 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks of liquids to mimic what the soil should be feeding to your plants. Then once your plants start growing and pushing their roots out, they'll start pushing their sugars down into the soil and farming that biology that will start converting more of the organic fertilizers and converting more of the soil. So that's why I wanted to build a campfire and kind of show you guys, because I really wanted this analogy to drive home. I mean, I sell soil to people every single week. And when I tell them, they say, is this complete? Is this ready? And I say, yeah, you don't need to add any, perlite. You don't need to add any peat moss. You don't need to add any vermiculite. What happened to this thing? Huh. That's why it got dark. You don't need to add any vermiculite. But you do need to add soil amendments. And they're like, what? I thought this stuff was ready to go. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, this oak log right here is ready to go to build a fire with, but I still need other things to make it work. It doesn't make it any less of a good fuel for a fire. So, again, things are really different once you have your fire going as far as what you can add and really, keep the stuff going. But this is one of the important things with, adding cover crops. If you're going to let your soil sit for a while, or at the very least covering your bed with something. I cover with like a landscape cloth after I put all the biology to sleep. I mean, that would be kind of the equivalent of making sure that you have, in a fire pit, you'll have like coals down in the fire pit, and those will get going because there's some down in there right now, and they're starting to heat up really good. And that's one of the things that's helping that fire going. So, if you're not going to do a cover crop and you're going to let your garden sit for a little while, you can reach out to me and I'll talk about how to make your garden dormant. I'll probably talk about this late spring because I'll have some garden beds that we're going to have go dormant over the summer, and I don't want to do a cover crop just because of weeds. So I'm going to go ahead and run through these comments because you guys are hilarious. So yeah, that's kind of talking about green wood. So there was a question about someone with mushroom compost, and it's not a bad fuel. It's almost like, is this a good wood to burn? I'll burn, and it just depends on how cured it is, maybe what other woods you're burning with it. as far as soil and compost. What I think is really important in the long run is try to reach some level of consistency, especially if you're making your own compost, and get down into some rhythm. And if you're going to throw any curveballs in it, let's just say, you've been composting your oak leaves and certain kitchen scraps and certain scraps from a certain juice bar around the corner, and coffee grounds from a local restaurant, and you kind of got a system down, and how much and when to add what organic fertilizers. If you all of a sudden get someone who's like, hey, I got all this whatever, and it's not something that's similar to something you've worked with, maybe set something up a little different somewhere else. Don't just push it all in, because then when it comes time for you to add those organic fertilizers, you might overdo it or you might underdo it. But the good news is when you get comfortable working with liquids, like we sell a liquid that's actually a micronutrient, and we also sell a liquid that's like the equivalent of a worm tea, a compost tea. And once you get comfortable working with these liquids, I basically never have to do a soil test. If I plant stuff in soil, I can tell what is needed and what's not needed simply by what the plants are doing. And if you're comfortable working with the liquids, it's not do or die, because you can turn it around on a dime. I mean, if the plants are hungry and you've got your sets of liquid nutrients that you're used to working with, you can correct problems pretty quickly. But just know it's a stopgap. It's a temporary fix. So if you need to add more of X, Y, or Z to the soil, and that's not going to be available to your plants for 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, you can use those liquids as a stopgap in between. And I mean, on the flip side, if you're comfortable working with certain liquids and you use them on a plant and you get a quick turnaround, and then you're probably missing that thing from the soil. So I'm going to go ahead and run through these questions or comments, because you guys are hilarious. I love doing these, by the way. I really missed you guys the past 2 weeks. I was just beat every day I got home. Chinese flowering broccoli sounds interesting. It is. It's really good. Yes, I do eat the flowers. What's my favorite asparagus? Corey, to grow. I hate you. Mike Mason. Stop eating with mouthful. Oh, funny. Fire. Beavis and Butthead. Corey already guessed it. Quit rub 2 sticks together. Talk amongst yourselves. Is the ashes good for your garden? Yeah, and by the way, Tammy, if you're going to be burning stuff in your yard and you want to put it in your garden, I think it's pretty obvious, but I'm still going to say it. Don't use any pressure-treated wood or painted wood or anything like that. See, now I got a fire going. That's pretty good. I can just put this log in. See? And that'll light right up. So a lot of times if I'm side dressing plants mid-season, I'll side dress them with a little bit of new soil, and then I'll actually put them on like another 2-week regimen of liquids, just to really get them going. I don't know if y'all saw I was actually doing something while I said that. I put the log in, then I added some paper to mimic adding the slower burning fuel and then adding the quick stuff. You know what? If that doesn't really get going too well, I'm going to go ahead and throw some sticks under there as well. Really get that new log lit that I just put in there. So this is exactly what you should be doing in your garden. I mean, think, the flames and basically the health of this fire in this analogy is the overall health of your plants and the health of your garden. The actual heat, like the place the fire's building up down here in the bottom, like the oven areas where it's holding heat and the fire's actually coming from, that's representing like your biology. And then, of course, the sticks and paper and logs that are in there represents your organic matter and the different types of it. So again, if you're just tuning in, we got oak logs, that's your compost or your soil. You've got sticks and pine, that's your granular fertilizers. And then we got paper, that's your liquid fertilizers. That's your worm teas, your compost teas. Learn how to use them. Learn how to blend them together so that you can have a successful garden and sooner than later. And if I would have put this together incorrectly, and see, it's really not going as good as I would want it to be. So, like, for example, I'm fairly confident about what's in here. Someone asked this the other day talking about a fire, and they were like, do you put paper on the top or do you put paper on the bottom? And somebody said to put the paper on the top. And it made a lot of sense because so Corey, if I had access to straight, I'm going to go from the bottom up. If I had access to straight mushroom substrate, I would probably only use it after I've had it for a few months or on extremely active beds and side dressing already growing gardens in very small amounts. I might add it to compost and into my compost pile. But from talking with everybody that's using it, this is where it's a tricky question, Corey, because I don't think the issue is with the mushroom compost. I think the issue is with the mushroom composters. Okay? And just like a certain company in Tampa that shall go unnamed was like actually this is a lot of them. They turn out unfinished compost. When you go pick up compost from the city, it might be unfinished or uncured even. And, that's not bad if you don't mind bringing it home and letting it finish breaking down at your house. But a lot of new gardeners don't seem to realize that. And so, I'm assuming these are mushroom growers. They're not composters. Maybe they know how to compost, but from my understanding is there's such a demand for their compost. I don't think they're letting it sit around long enough. So I don't think the problem is intrinsically with the mushroom compost. I think it's just the mushroom composters are not letting it sit around long enough to actually cure and be a good finished product. Now, shameless plug, that's one of the reasons why my product really stands out is because we are not trying to get rid of something that we have excess of. We are actually bringing in materials for the sole purpose of having ingredients to make a finished product, if that makes sense. And I know that sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but it really makes a huge difference in the finished product. Okay, like for example, let's just say that you opened up a cake recipe and you saw everything that you needed to get for the cake, and then somebody just donated stuff to you, and you had to make room in your cabinets, so you really weren't paying attention to how you were mixing it. You were just trying to get the flour and the eggs and everything mixed together and get it out the door. Probably not going to have the best cake in the world. Whereas if you specifically have a cake in mind and you go to the store and you buy ingredients for that cake in the right amounts, and then you blend the ingredients at the right amounts to make that cake, your cake's going to come out completely different than if you made a cake trying to get rid of your flour and your other ingredients. And that's what most composters are doing. They're trying to get a semi-finished product and get it off their property and make some money off of it, because they usually are making their money off of other revenue streams. So you're saying Monterey put a hold on it because they were getting too many complaints. Because I know they weren't doing that before, and people were complaining about it jacking up their plants. All right, Scott Smith says, Corey said, I know Monterey or whoever in Orlando put a hold and won't sell mushroom compost for 6 months because they need it to age. Here's the problem. I don't think 6 months is long enough. What all of the composting, and if Amanda's in here or she watches this later, she can pipe up about like composting standards. They're for safety reasons. They have nothing to do with necessarily the quality of your biology and your finished product. So composting standards are mostly set literally just to make it break down enough to where it's something different other than what it originally was, and that it's not going to kill somebody. And that's what everybody kind of considers finished compost. So the curing process takes 6 months. So I would say the composting process should probably take 3 months to 6 months. So, I know for our stuff, because we're handling horse manure, we let the horse manure compost for, we're going on like 2 to 3 years now before we combine it with the topsoil. And then we let that compost for another 6 months and cure for 3 months before we actually get it out the door. But we're also concerned about something different with the horse manure, but I don't want to jump topic. Scott Smith says, large wood on bottom, medium size next, put paper and twigs on top, and you'll have a perfect fire. So Scott says put the smaller stuff on top too. But anyway, I got why they were saying to put the paper on top, like after your fire's going, because like if I shove this underneath right now, I'm going to block the airflow. So like if my fire isn't really going, it might not even just be like a heat problem. And this kind of also goes with the analogy of what we're talking about with our gardens is it's the biology in the soil that breaks down the organic matter. The biology in the soil is working off of food and triggers from the plants, producing sugars through photosynthesis, sending it down with chemicals and signals down into the soil. The bacteria and other biology consume that, and then they go out and they start breaking down stuff. And that's the most simplified version. It's not wholly correct, but so basically, you might not have a problem with the soil, and you might not have a problem with the plant, but you have a problem with the relationship. It ain't really going. So, for example, I might not have a problem with my fire per se, and the fuel that's in there, but I might have a problem just simply with the airflow. So, like the way fire works is the bigger the fire gets, because the bigger the fire gets, the more hungry it gets, the more air it sucks in, and therefore the bigger it gets. So, just like your garden can start going downhill, it can also be going uphill. Your fire can do the same thing. So that's why I was assuming it worked to put the paper on top, because that helps suck in more air. That's kind of right now with that going, it's like me blowing on it right now because it's pulling more air in to the whole area and is going to get this other stuff going. So same thing with your garden. Sometimes you just have to kind of step in and push it. I'm gonna keep going with these analogies. If it was a lawnmower, you just might need to keep pulling that string. So pulling the string, that's like using the liquids for the first 3, 4, 5 weeks of planting new crops, especially in a new bed. I cannot stress that enough. It's so simple. Like I don't know why people fight this. Tooth and nail, like put soil in, add granular organic fertilizers, plant your plants, pour liquid over it, liquid nutrients, and then walk out there and pour liquid over it again 2 to 4 times a week for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Guys, your garden results will be night and day compared to what you're used to. Just do that. So simple. Put new soil in every time you plant. Add some granular fertilizer. If you're comfortable with your compost and you think it's got a lot of goodies in it, look at the bag of organic fertilizer and whatever the recommended amount is, cut it, put a quarter of it in, put something in the soil, and then plant your plants and seeds. Use whatever your favorite fish emulsion is. Now, my Compost Plus is a combination of hydrolyzed fish, seaweed, humates, kelp, and molasses. And that's a big difference because the molasses, so everything I just mentioned on the front end, that's feeding the plants before the soil gets a chance to feed the plants. But the molasses starts feeding the soil before the plant gets a chance to start feeding the soil. So my Compost Plus is a 1-2 punch. It goes in and it feeds the plant and it feeds the soil. So the soil gets tricked into thinking there's a healthy plant growing above it, and the plant gets tricked into thinking that it's growing in healthy soil, and they both start doing the thing that they're supposed to do. And that kind of gets that cycle going. So that's kind of where my liquid stands out compared to some other stuff. I know there's similar stuff out there, but I'm talking about just using worm tea or just using compost tea or just using hydrolyzed fish or fish emulsion. You're just getting kind of one of those. So it's like if you took hydrolyzed fish and got some seaweed or kelp liquid and mixed it with some molasses, you'd have something very similar to my Compost Plus. It's literally something you can make in your own bathtub. I just already combined the stuff for you. Yes, Scott Smith, that is correct. We are feeding the microorganisms. And that's, when we're building soil and we're putting our garden together and we're putting in our organic fertilizers, you're absolutely right. We're feeding the microorganisms. We're feeding the soil. We're not feeding the plant. But that's why I think you need to use liquids for the first couple of weeks, because somebody's got to feed that plant. Somebody's got to feed that plant because that plant needs to be growing and push. I mean, especially if you're planting transplants. If you're planting transplants, the transplant's roots are just right there where the pot was. They're not in your bed. They're not in your soil. And so it's going to take time for them to grow roots into the soil, and it's from the roots that the sugars exude out of the roots that the plant makes through photosynthesis, and it's those sugars that the bacteria respond to and go out and begin breaking down the soil. So the Scott, you're right, but you're not right, because we're not feeding the microorganisms. We are providing food for the microorganisms. What feeds the microorganisms, the food that they need to have the energy to go convert that stuff into the food, who feeds them? The plant. And the plant is dependent on the microorganisms feeding them. And that's why this campfire is such a beautiful analogy, because sometimes you might need to, I couldn't just tell you like, okay, do this and your fire will get going, even though somebody said it earlier, but they're kind of wrong. You might need to blow on it in this one spot. That's what she said. You might need to add a certain type of stick. You might need to add some paper. It's not just one fix. And so with your garden, if there isn't that relationship going on between the plant and the soil, you can feed the microorganisms all day. But if they aren't activated by sugars from a growing living plant in the soil, they're not going to go just start converting. The organisms that live in the soil that the plant depends on, a symbiotic relationship, if there's no plant, they're not just out converting soil. They don't really do that until they're in the vicinity of plant roots. Otherwise, all the soil would just be breaking down and wash away, because that's so anyway. Sometimes, especially when you're planting seedlings and not seeds, you got to kind of push this cycle and really get it going. But so I was hoping it was going to be a little bit cooler tonight, but that's cool. It's cooling down. I'm excited. I hope it stays cool for many, 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 many weeks, and we can all enjoy our greens and our fires and have a little bit of a winter here. So I know tomorrow night it's going to start cooling off. Just FYI, if you're in Central Florida, for me, the magic day to start looking at the 2-week forecast is right around Valentine's Day. So usually right around Valentine's Day, if I'm looking at the 2-week forecast and I don't really see any cold weather coming, if you really aren't comfortable and you're not too sure because it's looking iffy, you can look at like jet stream predictions, look at a couple different sources, and just make your call about right around Valentine's Day. You can see that 2-week forecast out off of Valentine's Day, and that's when we'll probably start planting the warm season crops that can't take a frost or a freeze. We'll start planting that stuff out in our gardens. The good news is, unlike I'm sure a fall garden, when our winter hits and people are out there covering it up, like instead of ripping the stuff out and planting more kale and spinach, I mean, it's such a short season that we get to enjoy this stuff. They're out there covering these giant tomato plants. Well, the good news is, if you're wrong, you probably only have a tomato plant to cover up that's like yay big. So a lot less covering. I usually won't like super tie them to my trellises until I know we're out of all the danger of frost, because it's way easier to cover everything up if you can detach your trellises and your tomato cages and actually lay the plants down and get them down close to the ground. Cool. Thank you, everybody, for joining me this week. If you cannot join me live, please send me an email at info@whitwalmorganics.com. And if you have a garden topic or a garden question that you want me to put out there and talk about, feel free to email me. If you don't want to, if you're watching on Facebook and you want to get off Facebook because things are cray-cray, we're simulcasting this right now live over on YouTube at my YouTube channel. You can just go to YouTube and type in Whitwam and my page will come up. There's only 2 Whitwams on YouTube, me and my brother. And by the way, check out his art. He's got some, my brother's an artist, and he's got some great art. He's got an Instagram, and yeah, check it out. But thank you, everybody, for joining me. And like I said, if you're watching this at a later date, I hope you learned something about building a campfire, and I hope you learned something about building your soil and being more successful with your garden. So thanks, everybody, and I will see you next week. I promise I will see you guys next week. I'll have a guest on. I'm still trying to figure out who that is. Bye.